And here's how I go about capturing Venus in the ultraviolet. I'm using a Meade LX200 GPS, alt azimuth mounted, and a ZWO 178 monochrome camera, and a Chroma U-Bessel UV filter. And first thing you want to do, of course, is get a really good focus. And I like making it a little bit smaller because it's much easier to focus. And I pretty much have it in focus here, but I'll show you. But you can see the contrast is so nice tonight. Look at that. There's the beautiful clouds of Venus right there that are dark. So now once we get this, put one great thing about, well, I'll mention that in a bit. Okay, draw your region of interest here. And then this tells you where we're at. And then all you have to do is click this alignment box and then this cut box here that keeps it in there. And what's great about fire capture is, see how the thing is moving there? I'm tapping the scope and notice the Venus is staying right in place, which is really great. If I remove all that, see, that ruins the alignment and stacking process. But once I do the alignment box, see, it's absolutely fantastic. And this makes it smaller size. And this is what it looks like at 100%. Look at that. That is beautiful right there. Look at that. Those are the cloud features of Venus. And then all we do at this point is just hit capture. And I'm getting 135 per second. And then once I process it in Auto Stacker, and that's a pretty good graph, here's how it appears. And I lowered the contrast, and then when I hit, I have these presets here. Look at that. And then I have another one that's just a little bit sharper. Look at that. That is incredible. And you can actually see those cloud features right there. Really nice contrast tonight. And we're not always this lucky to be able to see the cloud features as well. And also the scene is very good. Notice there's very little scintillation in the image. Here's how I go about processing the Venus image. Open it up. And here's the video. And then make sure sharpened is checked, and also that open in registacks is checked. And then the default settings are fine, and analyze. And then I usually use between 5 and 10,000 frames, depending on the scene, 25% to 33%. So let's use about 7,000 frames here. And then 40 is a good size. And then once you place the alignment points, look at that, because it's very bright, it'll also attach to the background. However, there's a fix for that. If you just adjust this minimum brightness, notice it will only be in the planet. And then adjust it down a little bit so you have minimum amount. 23 is about the best here. And then just hit stack. And it tells you what it's doing. I have a very fast computer, 8 cores, 16 threads, and 64 gigs of RAM here. And there we are, all done. And then I like to put it even. And then I adjust the contrast down to about 70 where this is a line. And then do all. And then I save and I call this auto stacker. And I have some presets here. Venus 1. And notice what the denoise, sharpen, and preview values are for layer 1, 2, 3, etc. Take a screenshot of this and adjust it. Notice that. See if I reset it. That's the aligned and stacked. And now there's the, and these were given to me by Dr. Alberto Segues, who's also a Alpo member. And then what I'll do is save this and call it Venus 1. And then I adjusted, played around with it a little bit. And here's another setting I use, Venus 2. And I find sometimes Venus 1 works better setting, sometimes Venus 2 works better. So I usually process both. And there's our processing in AutoStacker and Registax. And then I'll sharpen a little further with this program called Astra Image, which is not free. It's only $42 US, Google Astra Image. And if we open up our first Venus 1 image, I go to deconvolution, and then say sharp, that's too much. So we'd want to go probably about half of that. Now that looks really nice. So let's save that. And then I'll also do the second one, Venus 2. Now this is sharpened more, so we don't have to, we only have to do 1 to 2 deconvolution. So one looks really nice. And that's the sharpening using the deconvolution feature in Astra Image. Next, I open up the Venus images in Photoshop. This is Photoshop CS4. Photoshop Elements also has this feature. I use what's called a high pass filter. And I'll go over this. First, we want to duplicate this layer. And then we go to Filter, Other, High Pass. Then you get this funky looking thing here, and you can adjust the pixel elements here, but I find 3 works really well. So we'll leave it that, and then we go here, and then we put overlay. And if you click on and off, you can see high pass filter applied, high pass filter off, see? And then I also like, usually overlays a little too much, so I like soft light too, notice. Filter on, filter off. And there's also the opacity, which decreases how much of the filter is applied. Here we have 100%, here 75, see? And then here 50. So we just play around with this and see what looks the most natural here. And so that looks pretty good. And then what you want to do is layer, flatten image. And then you can try auto tone, or just, if that's too much, just increase the levels here. And then once that looks good enough, I'll rotate it so that north is up, and then just crop it. And I'll label this Photoshop North Up. And I'll do the same for Venus 2 and see which one looks the best. There'll be subtle changes in both, so I'll pick the best one. Now, a real hidden treasure is this program called Astrosurface, which was made aware to me by Alpha Mercury division member Frank Maiello. And once we open up our video here, we hit register. There's tutorials on YouTube on this. And then detect. And now what is not intuitive is you have to double click on this to make this green. And that activates everything. Open graph and analyze. So it's got 1, 2, and then do this analyze here. And here's the graph. Somehow this graph looks better than it did in AutoStacker. And what I'll do is, like I said, here the graph looks better, so I'll do 10,000. That's 33%. And then you could do global or multi-points. I'll do multi-points. And we set here, just like an AutoStacker, and then just stack. And there we are. And there it is. And then we save this. This is the raw image stat. So I'll call this Astrosurface. And then what we'll do is go to Filters, Wavelets, Deconvolution. And these settings were given to be also by Dr. Alberto Segues. And notice, there it is. And notice these values here, so adjust them accordingly. And then I'll just save this as Astrosurface 2. And that's it. And then I'll take that and do the deconvolution again and the high pass filter. But this is another way of aligning and stacking and initially sharpening Venus or any other planet using this new program called Astrosurface. And here's a quick side-by-side view. This is using the Venus 1 setting in Registax, the Venus 2 setting in Registax, and here's Astrosurface. And here's how I go about capturing an infrared image. I'm using the same scope, Meade LX200 GPS, 10-inch, except this time I'm using the 290 mm CWO. It's more sensitive than the 178 in the infrared. And I'm using an Antlia 850 nanometer long pass filter. So do the same thing, get it in focus here. And then change from here UV to IR. These presets are fantastic. And notice the frame rate, 178. And now watch, when I do the region of interest, about 170, it jumps to 400 or 500. It's amazing. And I forgot to mention, this tapping the telescope simulates a gust of wind. So if we get a gust of wind, this is what happens. You get a good gust. And fortunately, Fire Capture has this alignment box built in that just keeps it centered. Also, I forgot to mention, I like to underexpose it a little bit with the gain because when you process it, it tends to be overexposed if you have it at normal gain. So turn down the gain a little bit, and this looks good, and we're ready to go. And look how many we're getting here. Now, the first one, I go about 4 or 5 minutes in the ultraviolet. In the infrared, you can go 2 minutes because within 2 minutes you get about 100,000 frames, and that's plenty. So that's basically it for the infrared. The infrared image is processed similarly in AutoStacker and Registax. Here we have the quality graph, but with infrared, we get a lot more images in 5 minutes. Usually I go about 4 minutes here, and it's 75,681. So we could stack a little more, like 15 to 20,000 images. So let's stack 15. And here, this is about right here. 17 is a good amount here. 14's better. You don't have to do that many. 10. Let's go with 14 and just stack. And this goes very, very fast, tells you what it's doing right here. And make sure the sharpen has been clicked. It's very critical for this. And all done. And then I'll do the same here. Decrease this to about 70%, the contrast. You may be able to do the same with the gamma here, but I like using the contrast. And then save this. AutoStacker. And then here, that pushes it a little too much. So usually I don't save this. I process the rest in AutoStacker. I mean, AstroSurface. So let's go to AstroSurface. Now for the mid-latitude clouds, I use AstroSurface. And here we open, but we got to use this file, the CONV. That's why it's critical that AutoStacker had that sharpened checked. And then once we have this CONV file, we increase it a little bit, go to geometry, go between 1 to 2, and then go to filters and wavelets deconvolution. And notice the settings here are different. These were given to me by Dr. Cedeo from Portugal. Sorry for pronouncing the name incorrectly. But this gives the natural image of Venus in the infrared. And then just save this as AstroSurface 1. Okay. And then what I'll do is go back and push it a little further, go back and get the CONV, increase it again. And now this time we hit sharpen filter. And notice the settings here, take a screenshot. These were also by Dr. Cedeo. And notice this darker area here are the mid-latitude clouds. You do get some edge burn with this, unfortunately, but and then just I'll save this as AstroSurface 2. And then I'll just a little bit further. Hit it with 3. Notice the values here. And notice it's even darker, and you can increase a little bit here if you like. And then just save that as astrosurface. And then I'll go back and do the exact same thing. Go to Astra Image, see if the deconvolution gives me a little better results, and then go back to Photoshop or Photoshop Elements and see how the high pass filter works, and then do the templates. So basically it's the same from this point on as I did for the infrared, for the ultraviolet. And sometimes if the scene is not the greatest, you get these artifacts on the edge here, and those are very easily eliminated. Just increase the size a bit, and go to this dodge tool, and then hit Alt and left click, and where that plus sign is, it's taking pixels from there and superimposing them. So it's black there, so it's just essentially erasing all of that. And then just go back to 100. And there it is, all done. That artifact has been eliminated.